Diane is 23, standing at a payphone in Chicago, dusk over Hyde Park in 1971. In her hand, a folded scrap of paper, one phone number, one word, Jane. She doesn't know yet that dialing it could be a felony for her and for the woman who answers. 12 rules stand between an ordinary evening and a real prison sentence. Number 1 shows the exact day that crime disappeared. Number 12, the license she couldn't pour. Imagine a bar rag on a counter, a tap handle catching the light. In Milwaukee, a woman could work behind that bar only if she happened to be the owner's wife or daughter. Everyone else needed a license the city simply would not issue. In 1970, a woman named Dolly Williams filed a complaint about it, and the state agreed with her. Milwaukee fought back anyway. It took until the spring of 1971 before a court sided with Williams, and the city finally stopped letting a last name decide who could pour a drink. Pouring a beer had needed permission. Diane's own roommate situation, it turned out, needed permission too. Number 11, the 2 names on the mailbox, a strip of masking tape, 2 names written under it in ballpoint pen. In many states, an unmarried couple sharing an apartment was still breaking the law on the books, a leftover statute against cohabitation. Landlords knew, neighbors noticed, a curtain shifted at the right moment, and a complaint could mean an eviction, sometimes worse. Nobody had to enforce it every time. That was the strange part. It just had to exist, quietly, in case someone wanted it enforced. The lease was one problem. What sat in the medicine cabinet was another. Number 10. The pill without a husband's name. A small foil packet, easy to miss in a purse. In Massachusetts, handing contraceptives to an unmarried woman was a felony, not a misdemeanor, a felony, and the law meant it. A man named William Baird found that out in 1967 when he gave a 19-year-old contraceptive foam after a lecture and was arrested for it. The case climbed all the way to the Supreme Court, and in 1972, in Eisenstadt versus Baird, the justices finally struck the law down. Until then, a foil packet in the wrong hands wasn't just refused at the counter. It could end in a courtroom. If her body needed permission, apparently so did the truth about her own body. Number 9. Teaching her own body what the doctor wouldn't. Folding chairs in a church basement, a flashlight clicking on, a small circle of women leaning in close. In the early 70s, a woman named Carol Downer began showing other women how to examine themselves, plainly, without shame, using nothing more than a mirror and a plastic speculum. She wanted women to know their own bodies, the way a mechanic knows an engine, without waiting on a doctor's office and a waiting room magazine. In 1972, in Los Angeles, she was arrested for demonstrating a simple home remedy for a yeast infection, charged with practicing medicine without a license. The case became known, almost jokingly, as the Great Yogurt Conspiracy. Nothing about it felt funny to the women actually facing charges. Knowing her own body had quietly become a legal risk. Earning a full paycheck for the hours she actually worked, it turned out, was riskier still. Number 8. The clock that wasn't supposed to run late. A time card sliding into a punch clock, the small mechanical stamp of the hour. For decades, states had passed laws limiting how late into the night a woman could legally work, laws written in the gentle language of protection. By the early 1970s, those same laws were being challenged under the Civil Rights Act because a rule that capped her hours also quietly capped her overtime, her seniority, and how far she could ever be promoted. The employer who followed the law to the letter simply scheduled her less and called it consideration. The rule was never printed in a handbook. It lived in the schedule itself, in whose name got the late shift and whose didn't. The next rule didn't live in a workplace at all. It lived on a folded slip of paper with a phone number written on it in pencil. Until now, the rules cost her a job, a lease, a shift. The next ones could cost her years in prison. Number 7. The coded phone call. A rotary dial, an answering machine, a message left in careful, ordinary language, nothing that would sound unusual to a stranger. In Chicago, a woman with an unwanted pregnancy could call a number and leave word for someone named Jane. A member known only as Callback Jane would phone her back within a day or two. Another, called Big Jane, arranged the rest of it quietly. It sounded almost administrative, like scheduling a dentist. It was actually a felony already in progress, because under Illinois law at the time, arranging an abortion carried the same legal weight as performing one. A voice left on a tape wasn't just a voice. It was evidence, waiting for someone who might one day need it to be. The call itself was coded. The apartment it eventually led to needed 2 separate addresses, not one. Number 6. The apartment with 2 addresses. 2 keys on a single ring, a staircase. Footsteps that tried very hard not to sound hurried. The women of Jane kept one apartment for counseling, which they called the front, and a second, called simply the place, for the procedure itself. Splitting the operation in 2 was meant to protect everyone involved if the first address was ever discovered by the wrong person. A woman would be walked from one to the other, sometimes with her eyes covered, so she could never lead anyone back if she was ever questioned. Between 1,969 and 1,973, this network is estimated to have provided around 11,000 abortions, most eventually performed by the women themselves once they had learned the methods hands-on from each other. An ordinary apartment door, on an ordinary residential block, was actually the entrance to a felony operation, and everyone walking through it knew exactly what it was. Number 5. The knock that wasn't a customer. A sharp knock, then a silence that lasted a beat too long before the door was forced. In 1972, police raided one of the Jane apartments and arrested 7 women found inside it. It could have been any apartment on any afternoon. It simply happened to be that one, on that day, with those women present. For a network built entirely on trust, referrals, and word of mouth, a single knock was the risk that never fully went away, no matter how careful anyone tried to be. 7 women, ordinary women, some of them mothers themselves, were suddenly facing the full weight of a law they had spent years quietly working around for other women's sake. The number attached to each of their names was about to get a great deal worse. Number 4, 11 counts, each. A charging sheet, typed and stapled, laid flat on a courtroom table under fluorescent light. Each of the 7 arrested women was charged with 11 separate counts of abortion and conspiracy to commit abortion. Added together, the maximum possible sentence came to 110 years for each woman individually. On paper, helping a frightened, pregnant woman find safe care looked legally identical to hurting one. The prosecutors technically weren't wrong about the law as it was written. The law itself was the actual problem. Their attorney, a woman named Joanne Wolfson, looked at the court calendar and at the news coming out of Washington and understood there was really only one strategy left that might actually work in time to save them. Number 3, the trial built to stall. A courtroom calendar, a pen tapping against it, weeks bleeding slowly into months. Wolfson delayed the proceedings again and again, motion after motion, filing after filing, because the United States Supreme Court was in the middle of deciding a case called Roe versus Wade. If the ruling went the way she expected it to, the very law her clients were charged under might not exist much longer at all. It was a strange, almost patient kind of legal defense, betting on time itself rather than convincing a jury of anything. Every week the trial dragged on was another week closer to a decision that could make the entire indictment meaningless. Diane, reading fragments of the case in a Chicago newspaper over coffee, wouldn't have known any of their actual names. She would only have known that something enormous, happening far away in Washington, was quietly about to decide it for everyone. Number 2, the day the charges disappeared. A radio on a kitchen counter, static clearing into a bulletin, the room suddenly very quiet around it. On January 22, 1973, the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade, and abortion became legal across the entire country in a single ruling. Within weeks, the charges against the 7 women of Jane were formally, quietly dropped. Nothing about what they had actually done had changed in the slightest. Only the law itself had changed. The exact same act that could have sent them to prison for a century the week before was now simply health care, performed openly in daylight, inside real clinics, under a doctor's printed name instead of a whispered code name. The law changed overnight, the way laws sometimes do. What it had already cost the women who lived under it, though, did not disappear quite as fast as the charges did. Number 1. What the law didn't forgive until it had to. Here, finally, is the number that makes the other 11 make sense. Somewhere between 1,969 and 1,973, roughly 11,000 abortions were carried out by an underground network of mostly untrained women, working out of borrowed apartments, answering a shared code name so that no single person could ever be traced back to it. Every one of those acts was a felony the week it happened, punishable by real years in a real prison. Every single one of them became, retroactively, something much closer to ordinary healthcare the moment 9 justices changed the law's mind. Nothing about the women themselves had changed in between those 2 states. Not their judgment, not the care they took with a frightened stranger, not the reasons whispered behind any one of those calls. The only variable that had ever actually mattered was what a courtroom, hundreds of miles away, decided to officially call it. That is the part worth sitting with, longer than a scroll usually allows. Being illegal and being wrong were never actually the same thing. Not once. Not in this story. And for 4 years, thousands of ordinary women very much like the ones standing at that payphone, were the ones left quietly holding the difference between those 2 words, one folded phone number at a time. Diane never made that call herself. She kept the folded number anyway, tucked in a drawer, long after the law changed and people stopped whispering the word Jane. Some rules were written down and eventually erased. Others never needed paper at all to hold. If a name, a note, or a number like that turned up in your family's story, tell us below and subscribe for the next hidden rule.